So thanks everybody for coming tonight. We're going to talk about the topic of cloud adoption. Everyone sets their New Year's goals and they get all excited. We're going to do this right this year. Yeah, resolution. So I already introduced myself at the beginning. If you just came in, my name's Karina Homme. I'm part of the Microsoft Azure Government Engineering team based in DC. And just to kick it off, first of all, thank you everybody for spending the time with us to talk about what's going on. I think the best introductions is where we introduce ourselves. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing in cloud and government, that would be great. So Derek.
Hey everybody, I'm Derek Strausbaugh. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for our national security business over at Microsoft. Functionally, I'm the CTO for our cloud business, if you will, for the IC and the DoD. I used to work with Karina for about 3.5 years. Been at Microsoft for about 10. And yeah, cloud is what I live, breathe, and sleep every day. And as evidence, I came here hair on fire from Joint Base Andrews Bowling over there, fighting my way through various shades of traffic. So even those guys are talking about going to cloud.
Great. Brian?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Conrad. I'm the Cybersecurity Program Manager at the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, so shortened down to FedRAMP. As you know, we provide I know, right? We provide an authorization framework for commercial cloud services who want to do business with the government. And I've been at the FedRAMP program office just over a year. Before that, I was a contractor. I was still deep in FedRAMP there, supporting the DoD technical representative.
Great.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Richard Stroupe. I'm the CEO of Sequoia Holdings. Sequoia is a government-focused software development professional services firm, but at our core, we provide cloud orchestration services. So we help software vendors and government programs accelerate their workloads into targeted air-gap cloud regions. And over the last 6 years, we've been primarily focused on the C2S and the SC2S cloud region. But here recently, we're getting involved in some newer cloud regions for DoD.
So, we've been at this cloud thing for what, a decade or so in government. As we go into 2020, what have you seen in the past year of some successes in cloud, and what do you kind of expect moving forward?
Wow. A lot has happened in a year. I mean, I would just say in the national security space, because that's where I live, obviously, we had this little thing called Jedi happen, which I can't talk about, or people will come parachuting out of the ceiling probably. But I think that's a pretty good indication that even the most traditionally conservative customer in federal government is serious about moving to cloud finally. And I think that's been a very positive thing. I think just for the industry writ large, I mean, regardless of who won and what happens there, I think that's a very positive development for the department to take what was, I think that at one point they said 300 different individualized projects of various degrees of seriousness, and now give some gravity to a more holistic strategy around cloud has been a really, really good thing. I think similarly, I think the lessons that they've learned from the IC deployment and the successes and failures there. Those two entities closer than they've ever been.
You didn't either. You're even worse. So I gave.
I think we have a live mic out in the lobby. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
We have a live mic. Either Cast Systems out there might have a live. Cast, hello. So
I think they've come together. Bottom line is, I think they've come together to collaborate on some more things too, which gives us even further gravity from kind of the national security community.
I think from a government perspective, seeing the push for all the federal agencies moving towards the cloud, their modernization efforts, they realize that that's the way to go through the economies afforded by that, and it seems like a momentum that keeps building within all the federal agencies to, not only move to the cloud, but also be more involved in interacting with the FedRAMP program office to, to understand, what FedRAMP does and the part that they play, and, exactly all the benefits that cloud can bring.
From the services point of view, the frontline developers, I've been in the community for 25 years. So we've seen the transition from mainframe to J2EE to now to cloud. So it's very exciting for the services point of view. The developers are very excited to learn some new technology. But at the same time, there seems to be a problem with the supply of talent and the demand of doing cloud services. And there's now a catch-up being played, at least from a deployment point of view.
No, I mean, I think in general, we see a tipping point right now in government where we're going to be testing all things scale as far as cloud is concerned. So, Richard, what are you seeing as, like, you touched on some of the obstacles of cloud that people are struggling with as we are seeing a lot more cloud deployments with these large $10 billion, maybe even $50 billion contracts, and we are trying to get so many people into cloud at one time. What are those obstacles that you're seeing?
I would say two main areas. One is the workforce. We have to start with investing more in our workforce and more cloud technologies and certifications. Clearly, there is a skills gap that the folks that are cleared and have the clearances need to take the training, or we need to hire those people and get them involved in the community. But with recent events in today's culture, it's kind of challenging to find those that are clearable. But so having a skilled workforce is very important for us to scale the cloud technology. I think also we need to improve the process. Overall, the government obviously is very focused on securely vetting technology through a process before it deploys the technology. I think we have to look at ways to create more agile processes to break those barriers down so that we can deploy technology in months and not years.
Yeah. Derek, what are you seeing?
I think the biggest barrier is how government systems have tended to be built for the last 20 or 30 years, quite honestly. I think the workforce problem in some ways takes care of itself because, hey, we're moving, let's get people trained and skilled and so on and so forth. And yes, it's a new set of skills, but I can remember myself transitioning from being a C++ developer to being a web developer to so on and so forth over the years. I mean, it's not an insurmountable learning curve. If the appropriate resources are applied to the appropriate people and so on and so forth. But I think the bigger thing is we've got a lot of legacy systems out there that a lot of people just want to snap their fingers and go, hey, cloud's the solution for that. And bottom line is cloud is not the solution for that. Like, these systems need to be decomposed and reimagined, in some cases completely rebuilt, in order to actually be a viable candidate to move to cloud. I mean, I have probably 2 conversations every day at least of, hey, we want to do something with this, and this is a big pile of stuff that was never imagined to operate in the way they want to now operate it. So I think that's that sort of that technical debt that exists, that to me, at least in the community that I serve, is probably the biggest challenge.
Brian, I'm sure you're at the core of all this.
Well, I kind of see the glass half full, right?
Yeah.
There used to be organizational inertia to go to the cloud, to adopt new technologies and stuff like that. But I'm seeing, from my perspective, as I mentioned previously, a more everybody's getting on board. So that there is a culture shift going on within government to adopt the new technology. And, sitting in between agencies and cloud service providers, we get to see all the cool things that cloud service providers are doing. And then we get to, facilitate that and see the government agencies making that change as well.
So let's talk a little bit about FedRAMP.
Okay.
I know we talked a little bit about risk tolerance and the ability for agencies to take, FedRAMP and really use that as it was intended. Mm-hmm. How are you seeing that develop?
So this kind of does this. We can bucket this with challenges, right? So every authorizing official at every agency has a different risk tolerance. What somebody will handle at this particular agency won't be even considered at another, and it all depends on the type, the categorization of information that they're putting in the cloud as well. So that I think is a barrier at this point, or a challenge, let's say. That's sort of alleviated in some regards with the Joint Authorization Board provisional authorization, which the cloud service providers meet a certain standard. By FISMA, the authorizing officials or each agency still has to do an ATO, but we take care of a lot of the lift for them with the JAB provisional authorization. And again, it's getting everybody to look at risk in the same way. And it's that individual nature and that individual risk tolerance that proves to be a challenge. On the agency side for a FedRAMP agency authorization, one particular agency could accept things that another won't. So that there's still less work to do, but that agency has, the adopting agency has to make that delta up in effort and cost and stuff like that.
Are you seeing any shifts just in general? And I think there's a lot of talk about, I know Microsoft, we're talking a lot about automation, and so is the industry at large. And how do you think that's going to play in this ecosystem?
We have a couple initiatives underway. We have a team embedded with NIST working on the OSCAL program, and so a lot of the burden on the cloud service providers is the administrative burden of creating an SSP. It's a large document, 800 to 1,000 pages, with all the appendices, and so with the implementation of OSCAL. Theoretically, we'll be able to spit out an SSP in a machine-readable format that will be consumable by different organizations. Okay, where we are right now is I believe that we're pretty close to actually producing a FedRAMP SSP using the OSCAL language, and then there's different tools that should be available for people to read that and produce their documentation. We're looking at other efficiencies on ways to try and ease the burden. One of the things is a threat-based authorization model. So we have folks embedded with DoD and DHS looking at their risk scorecards and addressing which critical controls would address the majority of those threats. The benefit is reduced time to do annual assessments, significant changes, and stuff like that. So right now we're taking the bites that we can, and understanding that the automation piece is a much further target out. But we also have and we seek out interaction with our cloud service providers to hear what they've been doing in terms of that too.
Great. And then we were talking about a little bit what Sequoia is doing. As far as getting to cloud, I think, Richard, you mentioned the workforce and the ability to develop applications or capabilities for the intelligence community. So how are you problem solving for that?
Sure. So based upon our experience, we've created a product to help improve efficiencies for cloud migrations and software deployments in specific air-gapped cloud regions. So what we've created is a set of emulation environments. So based on the specific target that you're trying to deploy a software to, this would allow a software vendor who may or may not have experience in that specific agency to gain access to the software settings of that environment without actually having to touch that environment, which provides them the ability to go and create the solution and the user experience that they expect to the ultimate government end user. So this is a win-win for the vendor who wants to get their software embedded and utilized as soon as possible, but it's also a win for the government because they do not have to depend on a third-party contractor who may or may not have a conflict of interest in having said software deployed and having that software deployed in a quicker, faster time. And as Brian mentioned, there's several hurdles. There's a technical hurdle and there's the security hurdle that you have to accomplish in each agency. In our experience, unfortunately, a lot of that is not reciprocity doesn't exist. So we advocate building the solution on the low side one time and then deploy into multiple regions at the same time. And each one of these regions have specific nuances that through our company over time that we've been able to create and emulate that as well. So again, our goal was to improve efficiencies and save the government millions of dollars in having to just deploy labor into doing a lot of the work that we automate.
So are you saying that people without those kind of clearances that are needed for classified environments can actually do the work and then push it out?
Yes, both. Yeah, so our environment is completely auditable. It has the same controls as the high side environment, except it can be accessible on the low side. So you could utilize cleared talent to do the work, or you could utilize highly skilled cloud talent that may or may not have clearances to do the same work. So it does allow the government the ability to have an extra layer of talent that could reduce cost on the long term to do that software development and the cloud migration work. But ultimately, it also provides greater security, in our opinion, because again, the world living in the post-Snowden era, we don't want contractors to have unnecessary access to high-side government networks. So in this way, we've created an air-gap region where you could effectively do all your software development, have access to tools that you may or may not have on the high side because there's no internet connectivity and you are kind of closed-gapped in that network. And it would absolutely allow to create a faster solution in a safe, secure fashion, and then you could one-way transfer in a modular fashion to the high side. Still create that DMZ layer where you can do the necessary controls that you would do anyway on the high side. We just provide that extra lower barrier to entry to do the work.
Derek, sorry about that.
No worries. I wanted to do a little marketing for you. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges around these like monolithic systems is actually being able to properly implement modern software development techniques in order to target these high side networks and sensitive, even if they're not high side, but more sensitive things like government cloud as opposed to commercial cloud type of capability, and to be able to have a full on DevOps, DevSecOps, whatever we want to refer to it as, given whatever audience you're talking to, CI/CD pipeline and full on process that doesn't have to sort of die at pre-production, if you will, because hey, we can't provide access to that environment. So hey, when you get there, good luck. I think that's the true benefit here is everybody wants to move in this direction. Access to these environments tends to be the 800-pound gorilla in the room that you can't overcome a lot of times. So this is where I think this is really, really important to provide that continuity. So
one of the things you said earlier, which is absolutely a fact, is that the whole lift and shift methodology is completely bait and switch. You can't lift and switch in the government. You can't work. The government systems are older. They do use technology that may or may not be even a candidate for cloud software. So there is a lot of work that has to be refactored in order to make the efficiency in cloud work. I mean, think about if you had an old archaic system that's 15, 20 years old, and you lifted and shifted this application into a cloud setting. Well, the utilization is going to spin through the roof. So over time, that'll be more expensive than to say, hey, why not leave it on-prem, and then we can understand the mission behind the app, and then refactor using cloud-native technology that is efficient, that it's not going to be as expensive from a utilization point of view. And that's the kind of thing that we focus on, is really triaging applications, figure out what's a good candidate, what's not a good candidate, what we'll have to have refactoring, and then work with the end vendor to refactor that solution in a matter of months, instead of taking years and years through a normal government process.
So Derek, are you seeing, like, as so kind of playing off that last comment, that with IIT modernization and moving away from lift and shift, that perhaps people are taking a closer look at the platform as a service versus just infrastructure play?
Yeah, I mean, I think folks are generally trying to decouple applications from infrastructure in whatever methodology they want to use. I think folks are fundamentally doing one of two things: trying to remain multi-cloud and trying to decouple their apps from infrastructure. And then it's either leading them down one or two paths, depending upon in some cases, even the project or program or app owner philosophy on things that, they may or may not want to commit to platform as a service because they see that equally as vendor lock-in in some way, shape, or form. You could say it's a vendor lock-in because I drive a Ford truck. I mean, bottom line is I wanted a truck, and Ford happened to have the best one that met my expectations. But there's this other move towards various flavors of containers, whether it's Kubernetes or something else, and I think that's, everybody's trying to head down one of those two paths. I think the latest flavor of the day is we're going to move down a Kubernetes path. The danger in the road being there, and I'll just use the Air Force as an example because they are all in. How many 18, 19-year-old airmen out there are experienced practitioners of building an application that's optimized to run in a container? You can probably count that on two hands, if that many. So, I mean, I think there's just a lot of even growing pains there. Yes, we're getting away from lift and shift. Wholeheartedly agree. We should be getting away from lift and shift. It was a fallacy to begin with. But I think the next stumble in the road, if you will, is sort of these higher order services also do run into some of the scaling issues, and that's where kind of the rubber's meeting the road, and folks need to sort of up-level their skills as far as app development and really understand how to build an app properly before they can recognize the economies of scale that are out there for that.
I would have to say, too, I would agree with the decoupling between, software. In the beginning of the FedRAMP program, we saw a lot of infrastructures and platforms coming through. The majority of things we see coming now through agency and JAB authorizations or software as a service.
Nice. So I do want to be mindful of time. We have a little over 10 minutes, so I wanted to open the floor to questions. Tina, right over here, has the mic. So I think we have one right up here to begin.
Thank you so much. That could be loud. So, I have a couple of questions, but I will make it really fast. I didn't hear anything about speed. I did not hear much about AI processing. Sandbox, we call it partitioning out. It's a sandbox. They use it in UK. It's amazing. Has worked for the government very well. But I would say AI should do lots of that work. We don't have time against adversaries to train a bunch of people to actually do something AI could do. We should scale up the people to work with AI. See? If we have a philosophy of doing the same thing over and over, this train a bunch of people, is a paradigm shift in cybersecurity. And this paradigm calls for, one, look difference on how you give people clearances. You have lots of incompetent people that have clearances. And you have skillful technologies, they can do it. Like, they can get clearances. Best of MIT coming out, they can get clearances. Oh, I once served in Afghanistan, I got clearances. That's amazing, I think, for physical cybersecurity, but it might not cut the security we need in a cloud. So that's one thing.
I mean, I'm glad you brought up AI. I mean, I think Microsoft is, all focused on the intelligence behind all the applications where it's built in right into the product. But we were talking about workforce and whatnot. We are doing things a different way and building that skill set. So we're baking it right in, and to be able to do, whether it's automation with AI, is going to be a challenge. Any thoughts on the question here?
I think we're on the on-ramp to actually having viability of AI in government, quite honestly, because, I mean, I've been doing this government thing for 20 plus years, I hate to admit, and
or love to admit.
I love to admit, yes. It just means, yes, like I love my children, sort of, right? But I mean, I think the approach for years was just to, this is my data, I'm going to put it over here, you keep your data over there, and so on and so forth. It's really hard to have organizational AI when, don't put your chocolate in my peanut butter methodology for data sharing exists. So I think that's the problem that's slowly being solved in a lot of different organizations, and I'm I'll speak out of school on this one because I do collaborate with my peers and the rest of the business, and that's the struggle that we're seeing right now. Is absolutely, lots of folks, particularly to your question around cyber. I want to bring all of our cyber sensing portfolio together and have one perspective on the state of the organization, as well as, from a defensive perspective, as well as what should we be doing to protect ourselves, not offensive, but preventative. And the biggest challenge is bringing all that data together for most folks. So that's not a tech problem. That's a data problem.
No, I would agree. I mean, even just in a cybersecurity portfolio angle, most customers we see have 50 to 80, 100 plus point solutions. And if you don't have that end-to-end visibility, that you could have a lot of false positives. So, of course, we want to start applying that kind of cross-enterprise view of things. But beyond that, even in DoD, Derek, we're talking about cross-domain a lot. How do we share information across traditionally, and this is not a tech problem, but it can be as well, as depending on how you manage data.
Culture problem.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, but right, of how do you share that information? I know FedRAMP, GSA has been at the heart of how do we be able to leverage our assets and work faster, especially around compliance. Any thoughts on the topic?
Exactly. Well, I think we're at a point now where we want to see the possibilities are greenfield, right? We haven't within the PMO, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what that can do for us. Again, the cool thing about being in the PMO is we work with a ton of really smart people in cloud service providers and in agencies, and getting their perspectives through planned technical exchange meetings and stuff like that. We get to leverage that intellect that's out there and help solve the problems collectively. But we're sitting and waiting and looking forward to seeing how this can really help.
Richard?
Yeah, going back to your point, it is a culture issue. It's a workforce issue. We just do not have enough qualified, clear people with the talent necessary to do that. And just my humble opinion, 25 years in the business, most of the technical solutions in the statement of works and the proposals that have been generated have all been heavily influenced by government contractors who then deploy the solution. So you're really levered against the workforce and the skill sets of said contractor to deliver the solution. So it is kind of a cart before the horse kind of thing. But I do believe now with cloud and innovation that we can have other software providers come and disrupt the government sector by creating areas where they can have software as a service deployed in mission centers.
If there's two questions out there?
Hi there. My name is Ryan Gallagher. I work for Nominate Cybersecurity. We actually primarily monitor DNS domain name servers, and we were actually the firm that discovered and neutralized the bind bug, which was embedded in DNS. We were asked to do so by the UK government. I was wondering what your take is on the future of DNS and cloud computing and in AI in the government.
So an easy question, guys.
Wow. I mean, as long as computers have to talk to one another, I don't see DNS going away anytime soon. There's certainly ways we could all be doing better as far as limiting some of the exposures that are out there through DNS. I will say there's some things we're doing from a cloud service provider perspective when it comes to domain name services that I think are pretty interesting, because obviously we are one of the most attacked entities in the world. So we've had to harden our own fortress, so to speak, around DNS, and then we've provided some of the learnings back that we've had over decades now at this point through our Azure DNS service, which does actually take some of the complexity out of implementing secure DNS out of the picture. Again, going back to the point earlier of sort of workforce skilling and, hey, this is how I always did it on premise, so this is the way I'm going to do it in the cloud. We kind of prevent you from making some of those mistakes through the service. So, yeah, DNS is here to stay. I don't know what to tell you there.
Yeah. Did we have another question right here?
Hi, Kelly McCormick with Blue Cat Networks. We're actually a DNS company, so I'm really happy that we had somebody else ask a DNS question. Yeah, thanks. He's not a plant.
Do you guys plant each other?
No, it's a, yeah. We actually, there's an email thread. So, I guess my question is, to your question, sir, about complexity. You know, when you look at cloud migrations and agencies contemplating moving to cloud, that does create a lot of complexity. I mean, if I'm managing a network and then now I have to manage a network and a cloud instance, that does introduce more complexity. So I guess from the perspective of everybody on the panel, what's the best way for agencies and organizations to navigate that complexity so that they can effectively utilize cloud resources?
I'll jump in on that one first, if you don't mind. So part of the thing about cloud is understanding what the shared responsibilities are with security. Understanding what the cloud service provider is bringing to the table with regard to securing their environment, and what you're doing to secure the interfaces, your interfaces to that. That's usually a huge one that our agencies deal with. Is again just getting that basic understanding of the responsibilities in and of the cloud.
I mean, I think recognizing that pretty much every agency or company in this room that's represented is going to be a hybrid enterprise is a very important thing. Very few companies, organizations, particularly in the government, have the latitude to just go, let's throw it all away and start over. I'm not sure I know of any company that's real that's ever done that. And I think bottom line, to your question of taking the complexity out of it, is really recognize from both a culture perspective as well as a tooling perspective that you need to bring these things together holistically. Because I'll be the first person to say I have seen a large number of cloud projects fail because we got this thing over here in the cloud and we treat it completely differently than we treat the enterprise that we're used to running. This thing tends to be insecure, tends to be all the things that we don't want it to be because it's managed some other way. And so the sooner you bring your overall cloud strategy, in fact, I think it should be up right at the very beginning as a greater part of the holistic enterprise, the better off everybody will be, including the CSP, any partners that you have working on it, and certainly the people responsible for running and securing it, because, again, I've seen a lot of these off to the sides fail. There's probably somebody in the room with one, I suspect.
Are you talking about shadow IT?
Yeah.
That's another topic. One more question, and then just be mindful of time.
Richard, this question is for you.
Yes, sir.
You talked about the emulation environment. Given that the cloud moves at 100 miles an hour, how do you keep the emulation environment current, right? New services are being added to the high environment on a daily basis, right? If not hourly basis. And things are changing quite rapidly. How do you ensure that what you're building inside the sandbox or an emulated environment reflects what is there in the high side?
We have extremely high skilled talent that works 24 hours a day, no, I'm just kidding. We've got developers deployed in multiple agencies. And the government doesn't move at a rabbit's pace. It's very methodical. Things are in control gates, and they're publicized, and they're discussed, and they debate, then they make a decision and move on. So it could be months before a new service is turned on into a cloud environment. So it's very easy for us, from an emulation point of view, to mimic what's on the high side, because it is a slow drip from the high side. We actually are kind of flipping it around, where we are promoting technology and now saying, hey, this new service could really help you do X, Y, Z. Let me show you how. So we provide some case studies and lessons learned that we hope the government can accelerate some of those decisions. And it goes back to a point that he made as far as the reasons, why government could succeed or fail using cloud technology. It really is a culture problem. And they shouldn't look at traditional government spoken will methodology, because all you're going to do is take your on-prem architectures and move it right into the cloud. So one agency can't talk to the other agency. Their data has to be separated. And you've got multiple cloud instances, and you've got just a spaghetti mess as you do today, except you just exchange the infrastructure, right? That's the only thing you're really changing. I think they have to do a lot more commercial engagement, like with the financial industry, JP Morgan, for example, talking to Netflix. Netflix is a big cloud user. All these companies have created early disrupting technology, and they understand cloud. The government really doesn't understand cloud. And you can't really build an effective solution if you don't understand the technology behind it. So that's where I think you really have to focus your energy, is educating the work staff, giving them the tools, train them not on commercial technology, train them on the specific cloud technology that they have access to in the government. And then making sure, from a low to high point of view, that you have the ability to create what you can before you get into the high side. Because once you get to the high side, it is restricted. Things slow down. It's sort of like Interstellar. You go to the black hole, and then, 10 minutes could be like 80 years. And that's kind of how we feel sometimes.
I love that movie.
You spend a month on the government site, and you spend a day off site, and it feels like, that's the same feeling. But sorry, it's a long answer to a question.
So just to wrap up, we'll start with you, Richard. It is a complex world, and there's a lot to think about beyond lift and shift. What's your piece of advice for folks as they leave or take away? I would say don't be afraid to deploy apps into the cloud for the government, just because there's a culture development. Still, it's ongoing. There's evolution that's happening. And they're still playing catch up in some of regards to the technology. I would say start early. Educate your workforce on the cloud technology, not commercial, but what the government is using, the specific government brand of cloud technology, and engage your service providers. Those that have experience. Spending a couple hours with somebody that's been through the battlefield of knowing exactly what you're going to face will pay many dividends down the road. Especially heartburn and trying to make things work and deploy into the community.
I think my parting words would be something that I would be to echo something I said previously, is understanding what your responsibilities are with security and what the cloud service provider's responsibility is. And a lack of understanding in that creates a gap, and gaps love to be exploited. So if as long as there's an understanding of what what your enterprise responsibility is, I think, and have a clear understanding of what the cloud service providers bring to the table with regard to security is important.
Derek?
Two things. Spend time on automation and governance up front, because if you don't, you'll never go back there, and then you'll have you'll have something you don't want. And two is, remember, probably the main reason you're moving to the cloud in the first place is about the data in the application. People are still moving things into the cloud because it's cheap. But bottom line is, most folks are looking at it as an opportunity to break down data silos and get additional insight that they don't have either via a legacy app or because they've got stovepipe applications or whatever it is. So taking a data-centric view of application migration, I think, is really, really, really important. And I think a lot of agencies have learned kind of the hard lesson that way. Hey, we've moved all our stuff. Yeah, you've moved all your stuff and it all looks the same. You're still not sharing data. You're still not able to do analytics. You're still not able to do AI. So taking that view up front, I think, is critically important for most folks to get what they really want out of cloud. Because people say, oh, yeah, we're moving because it's cheaper. It's not what it's about.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, the speakers, for showing up today. We look forward to seeing you again. I think I was cut off here. We have our next meetup here. We do have some resources as you're looking to find documentation and whatnot. We'll get this on the meetup platform. And our next meetup is February 26th. We're going to talk about DevSecOps. So if you want to continue the dialogue, let us know. And please volunteer. Thank you.